Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about coaching to motivation and career development. Now, I've contended for the last probably 24 to 30 months with the pandemic. People have gone from offense to defense. And what do I mean by that? Offense, I mean, I've got career aspirations, I know what I want. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hits and we're worried about, are kids going to have school today? Are they going to be homeschooled? Do we have enough bandwidth at home? Is the bus coming on time? I mean, there's a lot of things that have turned people sideways. So what's happened is I think people have gone from offense to defense, taking care of their family, getting things right, which obviously we all understand. And I think about what's happened to people's motivation and career aspirations. Now, I'm going to make a very bold comment. And I think people have really lost sight of something. We tend to say, well, I'm really fatigued. I'm really tired. I'm not saying that that's not real. What I'm saying is that fatigue is as a result of us sitting in a place, not being motivated, not thinking about ourselves, not thinking about what we want, because we've been protecting so many other people for the most part. Now, again, this is not a perfect formula or a perfect science, yet people have lost their way. I want to share something with you to kick off this presentation. I was asked by one of our clients to sit down with a gentleman who they said, he's really lacking energy. He's been a great supervisor on our plant floor. He's a wonderful guy. And he's just lost his energy. It's like he doesn't care. I said, oh, that's interesting. So what we tend to do is we tend to judge, we tend to label. He doesn't care. I said, well, how do you know he doesn't care? Well, it's the way he walks. Like, oh, okay. I said, what does a good walk look like? We tend to label and go to this emotional interpretation. So I sat down with him and I said, "So, as it relates to your job, what gets you going? What excites you?" And he said, "It's a good job." Nonverbal. It's a good job." I said, "Okay." I said, "What's your next step?" He looked at me and goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Where do you see this going? Whether it's inside the company or, dare I say outside the company?" Well, haven't thought about it. I said, okay. I said, if you had to use one or two words to describe your relationship with your current job, what would you say? And if you could say it quickly, he said, it's okay. So he's not intrigued. He's not excited. He's not energized by his job. Doesn't mean he hates it. And I said, well, would you mind if I gave you some feedback? Of course, he immediately goes into the negative world of, here comes constructive feedback. And I said, you have a really good reputation as a supervisor. And he said, yeah. I said, so what kind of gets you jacked up, whether inside work or outside work? Here's the defining moment. See, often we think about motivation climbing the ladder. Oh my gosh, no. Those days have really dissipated or changed. It's the way people work and who they work with and where they work. All these things are now coming into play as it relates to motivational factors. And I'm going to reveal a book here in a few minutes that I think you'll absolutely love that really addresses this. And so when I asked this gentleman, going back to the story, I said, so, what really gets you jacked up? And that's what I used the words, jacked up. And he said, race cars. He did not hesitate. I said, race cars? I said, what do you mean? He goes, I'm in a crew pit. I said, what do you, I don't know anything about race cars. And he said, I fix race cars. I work on the engines. I love it. So what do you love? So I keep the conversation going. Said, I just love working with my hands. I love race cars. The engines are different. It really allows me to work with my hands. He said, work with my hands 3 times. I said, so going back to your work, you're supervising, you're not working with your hands, are you? And he said, no, I hate it. The word hate comes out. I said, but you're okay with the job. And he said, yeah, the job's okay. It wasn't that he didn't care, just wasn't stimulating him in terms of the way he likes to work. And I said, why don't you go in the maintenance department? He said, I've thought about it because those guys work on the equipment all the time in the plant floor. He goes, I would love that. Remember? Not using his hands, I hate it. Using his hands as a maintenance person, I would love it. So we've got some pretty good insight to motivation. It's not a job, it's not a destination, it's kind of the way he works. So I said, well, why haven't you? And he said, can't afford the pay decrease. I said, do you mind if I ask why? And he said, I've got 3 boys. I'm a single dad. Now that really puts front and center, oh, this guy cares. We just didn't know what the heck he cared about. And I said, could I have your permission? I know the HR manager. She's a good friend. I'd like to swing a bat for you. I promise it'll be done in a very safe and thoughtful way. Your job will not be at risk. He's now in the maintenance department. They made him a supervisor because he's actually a really good supervisor and leader. And I said, don't make him a supervisor and disable him from working with his hands. It's going to be like scratching a chalkboard. He's thrilled. So what they did is they made an exception with their pay scale and they transferred him over and gave him a supervisor status to uphold the policies and procedures of the company. His leader said to me, he just doesn't care. And the leader's a good guy, doesn't care. So when we're coaching and we're coaching to, um, motivation, we have to think about a couple things. First of all, think about two numbers, 76% and an 8-to-1 ratio. The Progress Principle reports, a book by Teresa Amable at Harvard, that people are at their most motivated state when they're progressing and improving in their job. Okay. So 8-to-1 is the Gallup organization reports that when we lead with strengths, people engage 8 times more. So now let's think about the psyche. Let's think about the person who's gone from offense to defense. And we sit down with them and say, John, got to call you in my office. And the leader does the traditional, here's what you're doing wrong. See, if we don't call people into the office for the good stuff as well, do me a favor, don't call people in at all, because all you're doing is wearing down their psyche. They're going to continue to go into a defensive stance, even deeper position. So the biggest mistake that leaders make is the following. They try to motivate. Sounds backwards, right? They try to motivate. That leader I was telling you about with the gentleman who wanted to work on race or loves working on race cars, but wanted to work with his hands. The interpretation, the labeling from the observation, because of the way he walked, by the way, he didn't care. He was losing his motivation. Oh, no, he has a very high degree of motion, especially when it comes to his 3 boys. So I said, when you think about the biggest mistake leaders make, we try to motivate. Our intentions are great. Don't try to motivate. Try to understand what motivates. So I asked him a question. What gets you jacked up even outside work? Race cars. He didn't hesitate. Now, what I did is I went into something called parallel. I grabbed something over here called race cars. What do you like about it? Working with my hands came up 3 times. So I brought it over to the workplace. I said, why aren't you doing that here? I would imagine the maintenance department. He goes, can't afford the pay decrease. Now I've got a position where I can help solve. Now I was worried that they weren't going to do it, and they did it for him, which was awesome. They saved an employee, but that employee does what now? That employee is singing the praises of management and HR. And quite frankly, HR departments need more credit with that because they do more stuff like that than they're given credit for. So the biggest mistake we make is we try to motivate. We have to first try to understand what motivates. So I want to hold something up for you. This is a book by my friend Julie Winkle Giulioni called Promotions Are So Yesterday. And she sent me a copy and I'm reading it. I'm like, oh, this is great stuff. I love this stuff. And what she did, which I think is brilliant, is she created an assessment that identifies, I think it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different areas that really motivate you. So I took the assessment. It was just spot on. And she measures things like, if your top motivator is contribution, competence, connection, choice, confidence, challenge, contentment, climb, meaning climbing the ladder. And one of the things that came out with someone else who took the assessment that I know, that connection was number 1. For me, contribution was number 1. And number 1 was also competence for me, meaning I'm demonstrating competence. So we're motivated by different things. And it's so insightful. The second thing that we've done at our company is we use something called the Motivator Assessment. So my friend Darlene Keller at Rock Valley Credit Union, CEO, great leader. She said, have you guys seen the Motivator Assessment? So we got certified in it. And it really gives you insight. Now, my top were, I think it was innovation was number 1, which is no surprise. Number 2 was autonomy, which is very commonly associated with entrepreneurs. And number 3 was fun, which if anybody who knows me, that is absolutely true. It was spot on. Now, the funny thing is, I have an employee who does some great graphic design work. And I thought, I'm going to make this grand gesture. I want to get her out of her comfort zone. I'm going to finance her own graphic design business. And then one of my other employees, one of my other coaches said, "So, what did your motivator assessment say?" Completely forgot it. Completely was not practicing what I'm preaching right now. So I looked at her report. Her lowest score was autonomy, which is associated with entrepreneurship. So I pulled the offer back. I didn't give it to her. I later shared it with her and she said, "Yeah, I appreciate it, but that would no, I would not have been ready." And you could almost feel her emotion of discomfort. So what we have to do is understand what motivates. We have to understand what motivates. We can't try to motivate. Let me give you another example. I have a client in the financial services firm in New York City who does some really cool things. They promote from within at all costs. They do not hesitate to promote from within. And we were doing some work, and I've cited this case study before, and we started to notice some of the verbiage from the new leaders was very non-people oriented, very operational, very data driven. And it was really awkward. So I called the person I report to and I said, Julie, have you looked at this?" I said, "What's going on?" So we ended up doing some further investigating and we found out 44% of the promotions over a 2-year time period into people management positions did not want to do people management positions. The intentions of the leaders were fantastic. So nobody was being a bad person here. Yet their intentions were so energetic, so thoughtful, so committed to career development. No one bothered to ask, "Do you even want to do it?" So it's like two ships passing in the dark, right? My intentions are great. I want to promote you. And those people ended up saying, "We felt like we couldn't say no. We felt like we would be disappointing people. We felt like if we said no, would there ever be another opportunity afforded to us?" That's why when we come to motivation in careers, number one, find out what motivates. Use tools. Get this book. Look into the motivator assessment. Contact us if you want. Then talk about career development. So I'm going to have you do something if you want to do it right now. And this is the coolest career development model from a conversation standpoint I think you can deploy. So I probably should have done it with a slide deck, but get a piece of paper right now and draw 2 lines or draw 3 columns, if you will. So you have a column 1, a column 2, and a column 3. Column 1 is the present state. So I'm going to say, Jill, if we had to sit down right now and talk about your current position, what are your strengths and where are your opportunities to raise your game? Don't use things like strengths and weaknesses. Just get rid of the word weaknesses, okay? Talk about things like where you can raise your game, opportunities to go to the next level, okay? You get a snapshot of how they see themselves in their present state. It's really a momentum builder in the conversation. Now, this is something called a psychological disrupt. The psychological disrupt is the I trains you to go from left to right. We would go to column 2. No, you're going to skip and go to column 3. This is the desired state. Now, this conversation can take 20, 30 minutes with an individual. It can take an hour. It can take a series of conversations. Now, the desired state is, you know what, Jill? What's your end game? Where do you want to end up? I stay away from words like position, because then she might think climbing the ladder. That's not what motivates people solely. And what you ask for is, what's your end game? Where do you want to end up next? Now, we just did this at a company. 55% of the people could not answer that question. And the leaders go, "What do we do? What do we do? It didn't work." Oh, yeah, it worked. You just found out almost 6 out of 10 people are not even thinking about themselves and where they want to end up. So what you do at the desired state is you ask questions such as, what would you be doing? What are some of the things you'd like to be doing that maybe you're not doing now? What are some things that you're doing now that you'd like to continue? And what would you add on to it? You have them describe that end game, which can help you better understand. Now, if you have somebody who says, "I really want to become a people leader," well, that's pretty tangible. That's pretty straightforward. Now, I'll share a real quick story. A friend of mine who's in graphic design outside our company, she is a great graphic designer. And they came to her and said, "We want to make you a manager." They were really worried about her leaving. Great gesture. And she said, "I don't want to do that." And I said, "Why?" She goes, "To be honest with you, Tim, I like working on my own." So in the book, The Progress Principle, again, one of my favorite books, you can be intrinsic or extrinsically motivated. Intrinsically motivated, you're motivated by what you're currently doing. Extrinsically motivated, you're motivated by what you're currently doing as an apparatus or a stepping stone to something else. Doesn't mean a job promotion, it could be doing something differently. And she loves graphic design. I said, "Oh, that's interesting." I said, "Well, when you think about working in a collaborative environment," she said, "No, I like to work on my own. That's when my creative juices get going." So there's also something called independent motivation versus collaborative motivation. Now, I happen to be, even in this coaching field, I'm much like my friend. I'm independently motivated. I like to work on my own. I have a 4 office suite where I'm shooting this right now, and I don't even let my employees come here. We all work virtually because I like to work on my own. That's when I get going. So when we're having those conversations and going back to our whiteboard coaching, have them describe, what would you be doing? What would you love to be doing? What does that end game looks like? I use phrases such as, what gets you jacked up? Oh, race cars. And you're going to learn things. People have not given a lot of time and thought to themselves and what they want. So I want to share something with you as well. Once you get that third column done, okay, and you can write it down and you can revisit it a couple times, your people will absolutely love you for having that conversation. Then you go to column 2 and say, "What do you think we need to do to get you there?" Trust from your employee to you or whoever's doing this type of model will explode. I have a great friend in California who works for an insurance company, the head of L&D, Tina. And Tina goes, "Oh, Tim, we use whiteboard coaching all the time." And the thing about whiteboard coaching is, if we go back to the fundamentals of coaching, coaching is a two-step process. Number one, it's getting someone to look in the mirror. And that's not always the things that they're doing wrong. In this case, we're getting them to look into the mirror to find the things that they want to do. Number two, it's getting people to take action on number one. Most people do not do number one arbitrarily on their own. We just don't do it. We're playing so much defense right now with family and work, and where am I going to work? Are we in a hybrid environment? Is the policy changing? I need to connect with people. I haven't talked to anyone. I hate working in my bedroom. You're not going to really stop and say, what are my career goals? That's where we come in as leaders. Now, as you're having those conversations, you're going to learn some things. If you learn them, put them into a coaching model. If you need help, we'll help you, but put them into a coaching model. Don't learn this stuff and do nothing with it. You're better off never having asked these questions. Now, the secret behind this is, when somebody is looking at a whiteboard, you can do it digitally with a PowerPoint, type it in for them as they respond, or put it up on a whiteboard, and you're gonna have that opportunity for them to look at that whiteboard. And the reason I'm pretending to look at a whiteboard, they're not looking at you, which gets them to now see something very important: themselves. The whiteboard becomes the mirror. The whiteboard becomes your partner in coaching. I have one client who takes this so seriously, whiteboard coaching. Every time she does a whiteboard coaching session, she takes a picture with her phone, puts it on the back of her door. She said, "It's always my reminder of what I need to coach to." So people will be more inclined to adapt, be flexible, to embrace this thing that we typically hate like the plague, change. So when we do that, and when we have those things that we can do as an apparatus to have those conversations, people will change if they can visualize how to get there. So, whiteboard coaching, column 1, present state; column 3, desired state; column 2, how should we get there? And that psychological disrupt kind of disrupts their thought, and it gets them to have a really good conversation with you. So as you're going through your career development and some of the things that you need to do, I go back to one of the biggest things that we have to get people to start thinking about, and that's themselves. And I have to share this with all of you. I had emotional intelligence and EQI assessment, a debrief. So we're certified in EQI, and I was doing this with a sales rep. And in the first, I'd say about 16 minutes. He used profanity. He was yelling at me. He was swearing at me. I had never met the guy, so I knew I wasn't the problem. I can get people to do that with me. This time it wasn't my fault. And I'm starting to feel a little edgy. I'm ready to go back at the guy. I'm like, wait a minute, I teach this stuff. And after a while, he kept saying this whole thing, this whole thing. He kept using the phrase, this whole thing has just turned us upside down. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, the pandemic, stupid. He called me stupid. And I said, well, first of all, how has it affected you? Calmly share that with me. So I inserted what I call an opposite insertion question. He takes a deep breath and he goes, my whole family, my kids and my wife. I said, how? Walk me through that. Forget the assessment for a second. Let's just talk about it. By the way, two lowest scores, empathy and impulse control. Okay. So it was the assessment was accurate. And he starts telling me that his wife lost her job. I said, oh, okay. I said, what was she doing? Well, she was an administrative assistant. I said, okay. Why is she not working now, if you don't mind me asking? He said, we're in a rural area. There's not a lot of industry around here. And I got him. And I said, why is she not working virtually? He said, what are you talking about? He didn't even know the virtual assistant world even existed. And I said, do me a favor. I'm going to put into chat right now a site called Upwork. I hire people from Upwork. We hire virtual assistants all the time. There's companies out there like Zirtual that will hire your wife in a second and she'll have her own gig in about 30 to 40 days. He goes, are you serious? I said, yeah. Within about 30 days, she had 2 contracts that worked around her kids. Guy was like a different guy on the phone. Now, the first 16 minutes were just brutal. The next 14 minutes, they were actually pretty good conversation. He's a good guy. He's not mad at me. And so I said, once I showed it to him, he goes, why do you think, why do you think um, people haven't told me about this stuff? And I said, well, let me compliment you on something. He goes, what's that? I go, your use of profanity is fantastic. And he starts laughing. He goes, yeah, I probably owe you a little apology. I said, oh, no, I think you owe me a pretty big one. And he started laughing. So I got him laughing. And then at the end, I said, how are you doing with this whole thing as it relates to your career? And he said, honestly, I don't know. But after this conversation, I need to take a deep breath and think about it. And I said, would you mind if I revisited with you? I said, one thing I'd like you to consider, and he's a regional sales manager. He's selling in a dealer network. He's going into dealers. And I said, what's the thing you love? And he said, I love my customers. I love solving problems. I said, what's the thing you would hate, whether you're doing it now or not? He goes, I don't want to manage people. His boss was like, I don't want to lose this guy. He really knows his stuff. We're looking at a people leader position. So I called his boss and I said, I don't think you should do that. And so they're looking at potentially creating a dealer advisor position where he's advising other regional sales managers to work with dealers. Right up his alley. Two or three questions got me there. Yet that first half an hour, I had to go through some pretty muddy waters to get there. So he was in a mental state he could even have a conversation of motivation and career development. So, in conclusion, get this book. If you have not taken Julie's assessment, it is fantastic. Very detailed, was spot on, accurate. I've had myself and one other person I know taken this, said, yeah, this thing's great. I would encourage you to do that. The other thing is the Motivator Assessment. If you want to reach out to us, feel free to reach out to us. We'll show you, or I'll send you my sample results. But I think we have to have conversations around career development, but first start with not to motivate, but if you understand what motivates, you'll be ahead of most leaders in the world. Good luck, everybody.